Some of the most damaging relationships are the hardest ones to explain, and they don't have to look extreme in order to be deeply harmful. Welcome to the Covert Narcissism podcast, where we make sense of what never quite made sense. If you've been listening for a while, you may already understand what's happening in your relationship. You can see the patterns, you can name the behaviors, but maybe you still feel stuck in the same cycle. This is where coaching comes in. It's not about learning more, it's about having the support to finally apply what you already know and begin moving forward. You need a coach. If you're ready for that next step, I invite you to join me in my coaching program. You can learn more about it at covertnarcissism.com. If you've ever felt like you were giving more than you were getting, like you kept showing up, trying harder, bending more, and still something felt off, this conversation is going to hit you in a very real way. So this week, I'm doing something a little bit different. This is a bonus episode, an extra episode, and it comes from another podcaster. I want to introduce you to G-Rex and Dirty Skittles. They are the host of a show called Shit That Goes On in Our Heads. This is not your typical mental health podcast. It is raw, it's honest, sometimes messy, sometimes funny, but always real. They don't just talk about mental health, they live it out loud alongside their guests and their listeners. What makes this show different is the way they create space. There's no pretending, no fixing, no perfect answers, just real conversations about trauma, healing, boundaries, relationships, and figuring out life one step at a time. So the episode that you are about to hear is titled Codependency, Trauma, and Why Boundaries Change Everything. If you've ever felt like your worth was tied to taking care of anyone else or even everyone else, even when it was exhausting you, then chances are you are going to see pieces of yourself in this conversation.
Hey, all. This is part one of a two-part episode. Hey there, listeners. Welcome to Shit That Goes On in Our Heads, the podcast where we normalize conversations around mental health.
That's right. I'm Dirty Skittles, and alongside my amazing co-host, G-Rex, we are here to share stories and tips from our incredible guests.
Each episode, we deep dive into struggles and triumphs of mental health, offering practical advice and heartfelt support.
Because no one should feel alone in their journey. Join us as we break the stigma and build a community of understanding and compassion.
Tune in and let's start talking about the shit that goes on in our heads. Three, two, one. Welcome back to another episode of Shit That Goes On in Our Heads. I'm here with my amazing co-host, Dirty Skittles, and today we have an awesome guest, Barb. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Yay! I'm excited to learn about you, Barb. I saw you talk a lot about boundaries.
Yeah, because
She's
that's
like,
like my favorite thing to talk about. And let me tell you, they're free. Once you set them, they're absolutely free.
So I actually didn't hear what you said, Dirty Skittles. You heard me talk about, and then it was like...
Oh, sorry. Boundaries.
Oh, yeah, of course. That's my thing.
Yeah. And that, I'm curious. If you had to just give a commercial on why boundaries are important from something that you've learned in your life, how would you convince somebody to set those boundaries?
If you want to have healthy relationships with yourself and other humans, boundaries are important. It's all about how to have healthy boundaries. How to have healthy relationships, like being honest about what's okay and what's not okay, and not walking all over people and not letting them walk all over you, and taking responsibility for yourself and your own feelings and needs and wants and stuff like that. So yeah, if you want healthy relationships, that's all.
Yeah, just that small healthy relationship. How did you learn how to set boundaries?
I learned how to set boundaries sort of vicariously through the 12 steps of recovery. It's not like anybody sat me down and was like, okay, we're going to start building boundaries now. It was just part of the process of recovery. And then I think of my core wound as codependence. And boundaries are essentially the antidote to codependence. So when I got a handle on boundaries, I was like, this is amazing. So then I started doing some reading outside of 12-step recovery about boundaries, and it helped me to like retroactively understand like what happened to create, the conditions for me to be codependent and have no boundaries. And then the process that I went through to build boundaries. But I didn't really even know that's what I was doing in the beginning. And so when I was doing that reading, like I was reading about boundaries and it was all words. And I have found that I'm a pretty visual person. So I started drawing these like drawings to visually depict how I was understanding the boundaries, if they were in the, like metaphorically, if they were in the physical world. And those drawings turned into handouts, which turned into a workbook, which is the backbone of my boundary building curriculum. So I have a multimedia curriculum. It's PowerPoint presentations, podcast episodes, articles, the workbook, and then, of course, augmented with my amazing coaching.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And you could, I wish I had your art to look at. I'm very curious to see what the drawings were for boundaries. I think I didn't really learn how to set boundaries until like my 40s.
Yeah, I was in my 50s. Yeah.
Yeah. But I remember it feeling so freeing to be able, it was with somebody in my personal life, to be a family member, to be able to set a boundary. I was so scared and I was so nervous to like speak up for myself in that moment. And then after I did it, I just remember feeling like the weight of the world taken off of my chest. And like, I described it to my therapist at the time as like, it felt like I was having a panic attack, but there were no negative symptoms. I just was like, I could breathe for the first time. And to me, that was so powerful to be able to be free.
And you guys didn't learn until you were 40s and your 50s. I didn't learn until I was in my 60s.
Yeah.
So like, it's so important to have these conversations now because we kind of want that younger generation to know how to set these boundaries and how it's okay to say no, and how by setting those boundaries, we can, how do I put this? Kind of reframe our life in a different manner.
Yeah.
Because like if I'd learned how to set those boundaries maybe in my early teens and my late 20s, things would have turned out a whole lot differently for me than how they did turn out.
Yeah. And I want to say something about saying no, because that is part of setting boundaries. It's a teeny tiny fraction of what setting boundaries is about. But most people think boundaries is about saying no. And I think that's because that's part of the hardest part, is saying no to other people when they want you to do something, especially if you've always done it. But it's way more involved than saying no. And I'm sure we'll get into the details about all that.
Yeah.
So what kind of led you to this? Was it because of something that happened in your childhood? Was it something that happened later in life?
Well, the conditioning happened in my childhood that created this codependent, enabling, rescuing, fixing, saving, overgiving woman. So what got me into 12-step recovery was in the winter of 2014, 15, I volunteered to co-lead a project serving homeless people at my church. And right around that time, a homeless guy named Dan started coming to my church as a parishioner. And he and I became very friendly. And I was like, God has delivered this homeless person to me so that I can really understand the plight of homeless people from the perspective of a homeless person. And it felt like, that way when I'm serving homeless people, then I'm serving homeless people, not, quote, the homeless. And he actually was very helpful in that regard. And couple 2-3 months or something into our friendship, we had a really nasty snowstorm here in New Haven. And I invited Dan to stay at my home instead of in the homeless shelter, because he fucking hated homeless shelters. I mean, who would like them? But you have to stay inside in a big snowstorm. And of course he said yes. I now know that's not normal to invite homeless people into your home. And so he stayed, and then another time. And within a few weeks, he was practically living with me. And then I soon felt trapped in my own home. So he was an admitted alcoholic and drug addict. And So, of course, the kind of person you want to invite into your house. And I now think on reflection, he may have also had a personality disorder because this guy fucked with my head in a way I had never experienced.
Wow.
And one day I was in therapy talking to my therapist about Dan, and mid-sentence I went, "Oh my God, do you think I need to go to Al-Anon?" And she was like, "Yes." So in case people don't know what Al-Anon is, it's a 12-step recovery program for the loved ones of alcoholics. And if you're not familiar with 12-step recovery, you've probably heard of Alcoholics Anonymous, which was the first 12-step recovery program ever created. And it was in the 1930s in the United States. And it was the first time in history that droves and droves of alcoholics got and stayed sober. And the second 12-step recovery program ever created was Al-Anon for the loved ones of alcoholics. And so you may be wondering, which I was too, like, why do the loved ones of alcoholics need a program? And it's because alcoholism is a family disease. So we tend to think of alcoholism, the problem is the drinking of the alcoholic. That's actually just the tip of the iceberg of the symptoms. And so them stopping drinking is not enough. It's not the actual alcohol, it's a symptom. But what happens with loved ones of alcoholics or other kinds of addicts is that the things we do kind of naturally to try to get them sober, clean, go to rehab, go to detox, go to meetings, end up turning us into like these controlling people who are trying to control and manipulate them into doing what we want. And then we get so focused on them that we completely neglect ourselves. We probably get resentful of them because all of the things we're doing for them and they're not appreciating us and they're not listening to us and they're not taking our advice. And then the alcoholic feels controlled for some reason and gets resentful about feeling controlled. And then they start blaming their loved ones because they're full of resentment against them. And then they drink and they're like, "Oh, it's your fault." And it just turns into this big giant shit show. So I knew about Al-Anon, and actually Dan, he would go to AA meetings, but he went because it was a warm place that served coffee, not because he was interested in recovering from alcoholism, though he could spout lines from the AA literature. So I went home to Google, and whatever I typed in for Al-Anon, the word codependent came up. And I was like, what? How is this word a thing that I've never heard of? Because I had been in therapy since I was about 15. I read 70 gajillion self-help books, done workshops, workbooks, seminars, spiritual groups, blah, 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 all the things. And I'm like, how the fuck do I not know about codependence? And I remember saying to my therapist, I'm like, what else don't I know about myself? Like, I don't feel like I got hit in the head with a baseball with the news that I'm alcoholic, that I'm a codependent. I feel like I got hit in the head with a planet. Like, what? I've been searching my whole life. I'm deeply introspective, and there's this giant thing about me that I didn't know. And she said, Barb, I think for you, codependence is like a unifying concept. It pulls together a bunch of things that you did know. You just didn't know that they were related. And at first I was like, she's just saying that to be nice. And as time went on and I started to understand codependence more, I realized that it was probably true. So I started going to Codependence Anonymous and very quickly got a sense of relief. And I think it was partly knowing there's a thing that describes me that is describable, that captures, all these things I've been doing, that there was a program of recovery. There were other people like me, that recovery was possible. And real soon, 3 or 4 weeks in, I remember saying to somebody, I think I need to be reparented. But I thought I made that term up or something. I don't know where I got that. Well, 6 weeks into going to CODA, I went to Cape Cod, Massachusetts to visit some old friends or longtime friends. And one of them had been in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, for 10 years. And she always raved about how utterly transformed her life was as a result of AA. And I was like, you're going to love this. I'm going to Codependence Anonymous. And she was like, oh, that's great. Let's see if we can find a CODA meeting while you're here. And she couldn't. But she found an ACA meeting, which I knew of at the time as ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics. And never occurred to me that I qualified, never occurred to me, why do they need a program? But I'd heard of it. And so I was like, I'll go for you. Cause I'm super accommodating. That's what I'm like. And her dad's an alcoholic. And I walk in, and in the opening reading, they said, we reparent ourselves. And I was like, what? And then they read the list of the 14 traits of an adult child, which is affectionately called the laundry list. And I was like, oh my God. Now Heidi tells me I sobbed the whole meeting. I don't remember that, but I bought the literature, came home to New Haven, started going to ACA, which I now know is called Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. Now that I qualified for, as do most people. And I started going to that program. And then a few weeks later, a women's meeting for ACA started in the same church on a different night. And I started going to that. And a few weeks later, me and 3 other women decided we were going to use the 12-step workbook and work through the 12 steps together. And I couldn't get over how vastly my understanding of myself and my family and my patterns changed, how vastly I was changing, how much healing I was getting. And so I did that for about a year. I would go to the CODA meetings, but I just went to meetings. I wasn't reading anything outside. I wasn't doing any work outside, but ACA, I dove in. And about a year into that, I was like, fuck this. I'm not going to CODA anymore. It just wasn't like ACA was like 100% fit. And CODA was like, I don't know, maybe 70. And there was some stuff going down in the meetings. I was just like, this is like my dysfunctional family. But that turned out to be like a higher powered moment for me because I was going to CODA on Monday nights. And right around that time, one of the women I was doing the 12 steps with had started sharing about her relationship with food and especially sugar. And she started going to Overeaters Anonymous. And I was listening to her and I'm like, oh my God. And it wasn't like, oh my God, what she's doing. It was, oh my God, she's talking about stuff that I experience. And I just didn't know other people had these thoughts that I had and these behaviors and stuff. And so she was trying to like gently get me to go to an Overeaters Anonymous or OA meeting with her. And I went and I was like, oh my God, I'm a compulsive overeater. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Never mind that I was that. And so I joined. And they handed me a list of when the meetings are. And there was a Monday night downtown New Haven meeting. So I literally went from CODA on Monday nights into OA on Monday nights. I'm now down over 100 pounds from my top weight. And actually having a food program was also really helpful to me in the boundary building process because a food plan is a set of boundaries. But also I had to learn what do I want to share with people about my food plan, my compulsive eating, my weight loss, my body image, because in the beginning, I liked hearing it when people were saying, oh, you look like you've lost weight. And after a while, it skeeved me out because I was like, stop looking at my body. And this was even friends close to me in recovery. And I was like, I really appreciate that you're trying to compliment me, but it's skeeving me out that you keep looking at my body and reporting on it to me. Like, I was just like, So I it's like, I'll stop there because I know I've said a lot, but like all of the stuff that happened in there was just massive changes. Like the first 2 years alone, I got more out of those 2 years than my previous 37 years of therapy and self-help and all that stuff put together. And one of the ways I like to describe that is that 37 previous years like scratched the surface of the iceberg of my life, and recovery melted the iceberg of.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
My life. So for me, the 12 steps of recovery are where it's at. I know it's not for everybody, but for me, they changed everything about my life.
It's really interesting that you're talking about this because my mom and dad got separated when I was a kid because my dad was an alcoholic, had gotten in an accident. And then we ended up having to go to court mandated Al-Anon meetings. And I can tell you, as kids, we were super resentful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like super duper resentful.
Why do we need to go to a program? Right?
Why do we need to go to a program? And it just really turned me off. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of revisited it again right around the time that my dad got sick. My dad passed away in 2005, I think. Anyways, he had kind of like just taken us and forgot about us. He'd gotten remarried, and his new wife didn't want anything to do with his kids. Mm. And so I kind of went back through like the Al-Anon 12-step program to remember the lessons that we learned. And it was all on him, right? Like we had done everything that we could. Mm-hmm. And when he finally passed away, I was like, you know what? I love my dad, but like good riddance, because I don't need this fucking shit in my life. I got enough shit that is happening on my own that I have brought onto myself. I don't need to like fucking deal with this. And like my dad was a good guy. He just had a problem. Right. And then we all had to like suffer. Mm-hmm. But well, here's the craziest thing. Like my parents did end up getting back together after a couple of years. They made amends, but like it always kind of stuck in the back of my head as like, God damn it. Mm-hmm. Why couldn't you get your life together so we didn't have to sit around in this giant circle jerk and talk to these therapists? Because at the time I was like 16, like I didn't fucking care. I'd rather be out smoking a joint and not dealing with this. Mm-hmm. But I can see how that program helped, because when I went back and reworked the steps, it did help me. Yeah. It helped me to like kind of come to terms with his death and everything that had happened prior to that.
Yeah. That sounds really painful though, that he like got remarried and his new wife didn't want to have anything to do with you guys and you didn't see him. Like that's awful.
Yeah, she was a see you next Tuesday. I'm not going to say that word on the podcast. We're just
that, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, she was horrible and did everything in her power to make sure that we did not have a relationship with my dad. Oh my God. And that he, like, she would say shit about my mom and things like that. And it was just super painful. Wow. And I can remember going to the house because I wanted to get some of my mom's stuff. And we were sitting in my dad's house and she's like, oh, thankfully you're going to get all this ugly crap out of this house. And I was like, It took my wife, because like I was ready to punch this woman out. Like, and Dirty Skittles knows me. I'm the most even keel person, right? You say shit about my mom, I'm gonna fucking rip your tits off. Okay, like I know. Yeah, we're good now.
And can you imagine the level of insecurity that woman must have had to do that? Like, what the fuck is going on with you that you need to destroy a relationship between a parent and their children? Like, oh my God.
Oh my God. And like it happens more than people talk about.
Listen, I'm in ACA. Do you know how many broken families that I am exposed to with all my fellows in recovery, and how many step parents are fucking assholes to their stepchildren? But also I've known quite a number of like step parents that healed their stepchildren. So
yeah,
you know, there's so many different kinds of people.
Can I ask, like, what is it like at one of these meetings? Like, what is it like?
So all 12-step recovery meetings typically have a series of opening readings to like, because we're always assuming there's a newcomer in the room that has never been here before. And we need to ground them in who we are and what we're about and, you know, what we're doing. And it also helps not just newcomers, but everybody like, okay, these are rituals that we go through. This is who we are. This is why we're here. This is what the solution is. This is what we focus on. And then typically, like different meetings run differently. So typically there's reading from some piece of literature from that program. And then after a certain portion of the meeting dedicated to doing those readings, then people that want to, often it's timed. You get to share for up to 3 minutes on whatever was read and or whatever is on your heart at the time, because sometimes people are so dissociated and they have so much shit going on. They just need to like share what's on their heart and they can't even pay attention. Sometimes a meeting will be a speaker meeting, meaning rather than doing a reading, a speaker from the fellowship will share their story. And the way that we call it sharing your experience, strength, and hope. So basically, what was life like before recovery, what happened, and what it's like now? And we do it in that way because we want especially newcomers to hear something from people that tells them, oh, they get me. Like I've gone through the same. So alcoholism is a good way to talk, to describe this, because like the most popular fellowship is Alcoholics Anonymous. So an alcoholic will do what some people call a drink-a-log. They'll talk about their escapades of drinking and just how shitty it was, and then what got them into recovery, and then the things they learned in recovery, and then the difference in their life now. So experience, strength, and hope, because you want to give the newcomer a way to identify with the person speaking, to know I'm in the right place and there's hope, because we want people to walk out with hope, especially if it's their first meeting. Some meetings will read, like I have one meeting that reads out of the same piece of literature. It's the ACA. We call it the Big Red Book. The book is technically called Adult Children of Alcoholics. And we read out of that every week, except for the 4th week of the month. It's a leader's choice meeting. Often the leader of the meeting will share their story, but sometimes we'll do like an exercise. Some pieces of literature will have an exercise that you can do and sort of. So there's some consistency to the setup of the meeting, but there's also time for people to share whatever they want. And then most people do some kind of fellowship activity after the meeting, whether they're on Zoom and they hang out and just chat about whatever, sometimes about recovery, sometimes not. Or if they're in person, maybe they'll go out for coffee or go out for dinner. My meeting, we meet in a church, but it's like, or a church parish house. And it's like a giant living room. So we basically hang out in the living room and talk. And it's a way to connect with people in recovery as human beings. And so I hope that I've answered your question in terms of like what happens in 12-step meetings.
Yeah. You've given me a visual for sure. And I think I'm curious. So you joined and it spoke to you. And I think you mentioned that this helped you to set boundaries in your life. So what did you set a boundary with Dan, the homeless man?
Yeah, eventually. Yeah. So but I didn't know to even call it that then. It was too early in my journey. So I don't remember this was over 10 years ago. It was like 11 years ago right now, actually. Well, no, I didn't actually get him out until like Memorial Day, but actually it was Super Bowl Sunday. So I think it was January. The end of January that he stayed over at my house the first time. And by the time it was like Memorial Day weekend when I got him out. So I remember giving him I was like, you got to go, giving him like $150. And he took it. And then he came back and he was like, this is way too much money. And he gave me back $100, which that says something about his level of esteem for himself, that $150 was way too much money for him. I was like, go stay in a hotel or something. And somehow I got him in the car and I drove him. I live on the New Haven Harbor and he was from West Haven, which is on the other side of the harbor. And I drove him over there and I came home and a mutual friend texted me and said, he's coming back to your house. He's walking. So it's going to be a while. And I was like, I got to get the fuck out of here. So I went and stayed with a friend a couple of towns away for 2 days because I knew if he came back, I was going to let him in. And so I mentioned that I met him at church. There was one time, and I don't know the timetable of this, where I was at church and he had stopped coming to the church, but I had been trying to get him away from me. And he came to the church, and now I'm like, oh, I had a trauma response. I didn't know that's what it was at the time. And I was flipping out, and I'm texting my therapist, and she didn't know who I was because she's like, I don't have your name in my phone because of HIPAA. Who is this? And I'm like, it's Barb Nangle. I'm freaking the fuck out. What do I do? And like 3 weeks later, just from going to recovery and understanding more about myself, I was the deacon on the door, which meant I was the greeter. And I was also doing the scriptural reading that Sunday. And I knew that morning, he's coming to church today. I don't know how I knew. And I was standing outside greeting people, and he came walking up, and I didn't have that like flood of like anxiety and adrenaline and everything. And I somehow, it was like whatever his thing was that like triggered me didn't. And I was like, what the hell is this? And I could tell that he could tell that I was a different person. And I never saw him again after that. And now, years later, now that I'm a boundaries coach and I have lots of personal experience and then lots of professional experience coaching other people, what I can say happened is that I was super new at boundaries, didn't even know that I was doing boundaries. But what I think happened is when you start building boundaries, it's almost like there's this energetic force field or like this emotional force field that develops around you, whereby other people's stuff is deflected off of you. So then rather than having people's energy penetrate me or people's emotions penetrate me and having me feel them, there was some kind of a block or a barrier. And I could tell just from looking at him that he knew that I was different. And I can't even explain like how that happened. I did eventually hear from a mutual friend that he somehow made his way to Texas. And then I later heard that he died. And I don't really know how. To this day, he is an angel to me because he was the catalyst for me hitting my codependent bottom and absolutely transforming everything about my life. And so I'm super grateful to him. It sucked ass while I was going through it. Do not get me wrong. It was awful. I can remember. So I'm in a sitting room in my basement and my laundry area is right over there. So I'm pointing over there. I collapsed on the floor one time. This is what I think of. This was my absolute codependent bottom. I don't know what we were doing, what we were talking about. He said something to me and I literally collapsed and I said to him, I'm having a flashback. And I meant an emotional flashback. I don't know how I knew that was I don't even know I don't know why I said that, but now I know it was a trauma response and it was a flashback to the childhood wound of abandonment, which is what all this stuff was about. And he thought I was having a drug flashback and he leapt into action. He was like, okay, tell me what you're seeing. What do you hear? What do you like? Tell me, like, he was like, get in touch with your senses. Yeah. And it snapped me out of it. And it turns out like whatever kind of flashback you're having, connecting to the present moment is a really good solution to get you out of it. But I remember being so shocked because he was the laziest motherfucker I have ever met in my entire life. So to see him leap into action was just like, who are you? But the emotional pain that brought me to my knees in that moment, I have never felt any kind of physical or emotional pain, anything like that ever in my entire life. It was the worst moment of my life. Wow. And I felt like I was going to die. And I have felt like I was going to die many times, like when you were talking about Dirty Skittles, about like setting the boundary with your family, like having a panic attack. I would often feel like my life is under threat. I'm going to die at the thought of setting boundaries, not actually setting them, like before even setting them, just feeling like you're going to die. And it's common. It's a trauma response because we grow up enmeshed and we're basically unenmeshing ourselves from often our families of origin, but, you know, perhaps other people, and it's painful.
That's so you're tapping into something that I need to like investigate later. But and I think it's because for me, I always assume, well, I guess what I know of a trauma response for my life has usually been anger. Where I'll get really angry because I see it as like I'm protecting myself. So like I'll get really angry to protect myself.
Yeah.
But and G-Rex was around for this, I had gone through like such a fucking emotional, psychological downfall last year. And in me trying to take care of myself, I remember finding it so odd and so strange that I was fearful, that I had like such fear that I didn't want to leave my house for fear that this person or this thing was going to be at the end of my driveway. Or like if I had to go grocery shopping, the fear that they would be there, that they would find me, that they would pull me back into the thing that had fucked me. And I didn't see that as a trauma response at the time. But as you're talking about your story and sharing that, now I'm like, oh shit. Like, you know, I should probably unpack that later to figure out like, is that part of that? Was that a trauma response?
Yeah, it probably was. And so I feel the need to say a little bit about like the ACA program and what I've learned in it. So I didn't know that I had childhood trauma. I didn't know about intergenerational family dysfunction, which is the root cause of childhood trauma. Trauma is basically the cause of codependency and many other things, including addiction. It's kind of like root cause for so much of what's going on in the world, because we have been hacking and pillaging and burning and raping throughout history. So the issues live in our tissues. We are like multi-generational trauma. And then there are the populations that have been like genocide has been committed, or, you know, have been marginalized in, you know, the most heinous ways. And so there are pockets of people who have it way worse. And then there are just families that are much, much worse. So I thought when I got into ACA, I heard people talking about trauma, and I knew, like, my dad tried to strangle me a couple of times when I was in my late teens. And I knew that was traumatic, but I didn't understand that it was trauma, because I thought trauma was, you know, you were in a hurricane, or, you know, you were in a war zone or something. And it is. But what a lot of people, the distinction they make is that's like big T trauma. And also being strangled by your dad is big T trauma. But because I was in denial, because that's part of what happens with intergenerational family dysfunction. You think things that are not normal are normal because to you, they are normal. And what I learned is that what I had is little t, or relational trauma. I call it like the drip drip of emotional invalidation. And the result is that we have an abandonment wound. So some people who grow up in dysfunction are literally physically abandoned. Either the parents leave, or they were never around, or they're in foster, or, you know, their foster care, or their parents die. All of us, whether we have physical abandonment or not, have emotional abandonment. So this is where our like inborn needs for emotional security and support and protection and safety are not met. And this doesn't mean that our parents don't love us. Like, it does not mean that. You can come from a super dysfunctional family that is also very loving. The two are not related. You can also come from a super dysfunctional family where they fucking hate you. Like, that can, of course, you know, that can happen too. But I remember thinking I just didn't have it as bad as the other people in the room. Like, my first 6 months, I was like, I didn't get the shit kicked out of me. I didn't get my bones broken. I didn't get raped. I didn't get burned. I didn't get told I was a piece of shit. But I knew that I had the traits, you know, that I talked about earlier. I just didn't know how I got them. And then I came to understand, and I really don't know where I got this, that the absence of good things happening results in trauma. And I was like, oh, that happened. I had the absence of good things like emotional validation, My family did things like use sarcasm and teasing as like a weapon. And then when you would be like, that was painful, they're like, it's just a joke. It's not a fucking joke. And when I was a kid, we would say sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Oh, yes, they do hurt you. Like words can be some of the most painful things, because the worst thing that can happen to a human is that they can be ostracized. We are group animals. We need community. And so when you are pushed to the margins of a society, it's like the worst thing you can do to a human. And we do that with words. And then I later learned that unmet needs results in trauma, which is a different way of saying the absence of good things happening. And so what the result is that we have this abandonment wound. And there's a piece of literature in the ACA program that calls it a soul wound. Like it's at the level of our soul. And so what happened to me when whatever that situation was with Dan is whatever was going on, like nicked my soul wound and just like reverberated. And so I really to this day don't understand. There was something about Dan that made me feel like I had to rescue him. And then it became intolerable to have him around. So I had this major dilemma where I feel like I'm going to die if I don't rescue him. Like I'm a horrible, despicable person because I have it so much better than he does. And I have this, and I'm a homeowner and I have a master's degree and I have a career at Yale University and I have a retirement fund and health insurance, and he doesn't even have a home. So I just felt this obligation, and I don't know what it was about him. So I now know like all of my relationships were codependent, but my worst ones were romantic. So I happened to date men. And when I did my relationship inventory and recovery, I could see like, oh, every single relationship, every guy I was with, the codependence got worse and worse over time. And so even though Dan wasn't a romantic relationship, there was just something about him that like locked into my codependent pattern in a deeper way than anyone else had. And now I'm like, thank God, because I got into recovery. But that I didn't understand any of that trauma stuff in the beginning. And now, like, I do want to say this. The way that I describe the ACA program is it's a 12-step recovery program where it's a trauma recovery program where you reparent yourself and you use the 12 steps to recover. That's how I think about it. So it is a 12-step recovery program, but it's really different than most other programs because it acknowledges trauma. It acknowledges intergenerational family dysfunction. It acknowledges the fact that we are a product of our environment. Whereas in my OA program, I'm not allowed to look at my family system. I'm not allowed to look at anybody else. I have to look at myself and my behavior and what I have done. And then I need to clean up the wreckage of my past, of the things that I did. And that matters, and it's important, and it saves people's lives, including mine. But it's not enough, because when you grow up in dysfunction, you take on patterns that are survival traits to get you through the trauma, the drama, the dysfunction, and the chaos.
Hi, all. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I'm G-Rex.
And I'm Dirty Skittles.
Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. We'd love to listen to your feedback.
We can't do this without you guys.
If you've been listening, learning, and starting to see the patterns in your world, but still feel stuck in these same cycles, that's not because you're missing more information. It's because this is not something you're meant to untangle alone. There's a point where understanding is not enough, and you need support and actually moving through it. If you're there, I invite you to work with me. Your story matters, and you deserve to be heard without judgment. If you're ready to take that next step toward healing, check out my coaching services at www.covertnarcissism.com. I am here and ready to help. And don't forget to subscribe for more empowering episodes like this one. The information provided by Renee Swanson, Covert Narcissism Podcast, and CNG Life Coaching is for educational purposes only and is not to be used for diagnosis purposes. It is not intended to be a substitute for clinical care. Please consult a healthcare provider for guidance specific to your case. This material discusses narcissism in general. Renee shares stories from her personal experience as well as from those that she has worked with for several years. Her material does not claim that any specific person has narcissism and should not be used to refer to any specific person as having narcissism. Permission is not granted to link to or repost this material to support an allegation or support a claim that any specific person is a narcissist. That would be an unauthorized misuse of the material and the information provided. Thank you.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.